the idea of progressive education arose long before its appearance in modern society. In fact, all outstanding pedagogues of the past developed pedagogical science in the direction of greater democratization. Industrial society was characterized by traditional education based on authoritarian leadership style, classical training of students, and reliance on direct instructions. The term progressive education came into widespread use, distinguishing progressive educational methodologies from traditional 19th century educational programs. However, only in the middle of the 20th century, the most striking discoveries of world philosophical and psychological thought naturally combined within a new educational paradigm. It received the name of humanistic education or learner-centered pedagogy. In the new humanistic educational environment, the students are active, not just consuming information, but also generating ideas. They bear greater responsibility for their own education. It is precisely such members of society that the democratic society needs. Thus, in today's education, learning-centered pedagogy is widely developing. However, the learner-centered approach imposes certain requirements on the competence of teachers. One such competence is the teacher's ability to see learning situations through the student's eyes. Without this, neither full-fledged dialogue in the classroom, effective teaching, nor successful comprehension of knowledge are possible. Training young teachers in this skill should be recognized as one of the most important pedagogical tasks of today. The purpose of this study was to determine how many university students enrolled in an educational program and simultaneously working in the school system have the ability for learner-centered teaching. The subject of the study became graduate students of Tura University, majoring in education, and are currently working in preschools and elementary schools in New York City. Before the spread of learner-centered pedagogy, the idea of progressive education was developed in the works of John Dewey, Marie Montessori, Jean Piaget, and Lev Vygotsky. They belong to different areas of professional activity and were interested in different aspects of education, from the adaptation of educational outcomes to the requirements of everyday life and the organization of the learning environment to the nature of the child's acquisition of knowledge. But together, these theories gave a very powerful impetus to the emergence of a humanistic doctrine in education in the second half of the 20th century. John Dewey founded an experimental school modeled after democratic society. He believed that schooling should not be suppressive and routine. Students should acquire knowledge not by memorizing facts and repeatedly listening to incomprehensible lectures, but by solving problems that might arise in real life. He helped his students become independent and capable of self-realization. Maria Montessori was against any authoritarianship in pedagogy. She believed in education when children are also given an opportunity to lead their learning. She was convinced that for productive learning, children must be provided with the right conditions. She was the first to reorganize the preschool learning environment, making it learner-centered mentally and physically. In her classroom, the size of furnishing and materials strictly corresponded to the age and physical build of children. Jean Piaget rejected the 19th and early 20th century view of learning as a passive reflection of reality and proposed the concept of active learning. His approach was named cognitive constructivism. According to Piaget, learning is a process of transformation of knowledge, not just accumulation of it. If a traditional teacher fills children with ready-made ideas and facts, a constructivist teacher creates conditions in which the students themselves seek answers for their questions. Lev Vygotsky emphasized the social nature of learning. He pointed out the importance for children when learning to interact with more knowledgeable people, and this approach was named social constructivism. According to Vygotsky, dialogue with teachers and peers is a necessary condition for learning and comprehending new information about the world. The progressive educators of modern times were characterized by the unacceptability of an authoritarian style of interaction with students. Despite all the differences in their theories, they shared the idea of child-centered education. In the second half of the last century, the learner-centered approach to education became widespread, embodying the best features of the progressive theories of the recent past. And at the same time, it was an independent approach that was developed under the influence of humanistic psychology, initiated by American psychologists Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers, a psychotherapist and a clinical and educational psychologist, known for his client-centered research, proposed the concept of client-centered therapy. The concept was universal, and the relationship between teacher and student could be seen as a relationship between psychotherapist and client. Just as in psychotherapy, where there are two opposite approaches, therapist-centered versus client-centered, in education there are two learning environments, teacher-centered versus learner-centered ones. According to Rogers, one of the most important conditions for this new type of teaching is that the teacher has an empathic understanding of the student. In his time, Carl Rogers defined such an ability in teaching as follows: this attitude of standing in the other's shoes or viewing the world through the student's eyes is almost unheard of in the classroom. Our study hypotheses were: first, one of the most important characteristics underlying the teacher's ability to learner-centered pedagogy is the ability to see the learning situation and learning task through the student's eyes. The second one, among indicators of this competency are the teacher's capability of deeply focusing attention on the student and understanding of how she or he thinks while solving the learning problem. The task was to determine how common the ability for learner-centered pedagogy is among university students currently working in schools. Our subjects were 270 graduate students who attended the author's online courses in 2022-2023. The procedure was they observed children in their classrooms while children were solving various problems in reading, writing, math, drawing, and social sciences. For our study, they answered the question, what sequence of actions did the student that you were observing perform to solve his/her problem? The instrument was a computerized survey. In the question, the study participants were asked, student and sequence of the actions are two key concepts or two criteria which teachers' answers were expected to consider. The first concept allows us to discover such characteristics of the school teacher as a tendency to focus on the student's activity in a learning situation. The second concept reflects the ability of the school teacher to specifically and detailedly describe the student's intellectual actions. According to the first criterion, the answers of the study participants can be divided into four categories: sociocentric, egocentric, mixed, and others. According to the second criterion, their answers can be divided into two categories: specific and non-specific. Answers are considered sociocentric if the study participants mainly and primarily describe the students in learning situations. Such an example is presented in Figure 1, where the teacher's attention is focused exclusively on the student's solution. Answers are egocentric if the study participants talk mostly about themselves and rather determine their own actions and reasoning at the time of observing the student. Little is said about the student, only generally and indirectly. Such an example is presented below. Answers are considered mixed if they include both above categories. That is, the study participants' attention is directed to both the teacher and the student. Descriptions of their activities are equivalent in their semantic load, and one is incomprehensible without the other. Such an example is shown in the Figure 3. Answers are categorized as others when explanations of the student's activity are replaced by irrelevant reasoning. Such an example illustrating the social science problem solution is shown in figure 4. Distribution of the teacher's answers by categories is shown below. In the study participants' answers, general formulations prevailed about what the student observed or the observer him herself should have done in the learning situation. However, 38.7% of the investigated population still followed the second requirement and specified the student's sequence of actions when solving the problem. A distinctive feature of this and similar answers is the teacher's ability to unfold the process of intellectual activity of the student solving the problem, that is, present it in a step-by-step form and analyze it. It is noteworthy that most of the school teachers surveyed in our study, 61.3%, did not cope with this task in full. A little more than 1/3 of the investigated population, 36%, completed the study task having satisfied both instructional requirements. These participants were deeply focused on the student under observation, reflected primarily his/her intellectual activity, and identified and described it in detail, the sequence of his/her actions while solving the problem. Is every third a little or a lot? Only a little more than 1/3 of the investigated population coped with the experimental task. Every third study participant demonstrated qualities that suggest he has an ability for learner-centered pedagogy. Every third seems to be a small number. However, Rogers also discovered that the student-centered technique is not for everyone, that empathic understanding is a rare personality quality. If we look at the result obtained from Rogers' angle, it is not at all hopeless. What may be the cause of teachers' egocentrism? Alarming is the fact that another third of the population studied did not cope with the study task at all. These participants focused their attention on themselves and talked exclusively or mostly about their own activities in the learning situation. Egocentrism is a childish trait. It is observed in preschoolers when thinking is just developing. It appears in adolescence again and is associated with the process of identity formation. Egocentrism in young and healthy adults is a sign of infantility, personal immaturity, and problems with identity. Adults exhibiting egocentrism failed to fully develop their identity in adolescence. Apparently, these study participants were not teachers by vocation, but came to this profession guided by other considerations. what prevents teachers from analyzing students' mind? Even if the study participants were able to see the task from children's perspectives, they were not always able to unfold the process of solving into a step-by-step intellectual activity. And the most probable cause seems to be that these teachers were not properly taught in their school years themselves. Their instructors did not require them to present solutions to problems logically and in detail. Such study participants were lacking a culture of mental work. Can teachers be trained to become student-centered? A relatively small number of study participants, 1/5 of the investigated population, that is 20.7%, whose answers fell into the mixed category, attracted our special attention. Their answers contained descriptions required. However, those descriptions were unsystematic, disorganized, did not set out the sequence of actions taken by the student, and were rather generalized than specific. These representatives of the studied population had poor discipline of mind. Although they did not fully cope with the study task, they had the preconditions for the possible development of the necessary skills. That's how the idea of a complex training program for the school teachers in the framework of the course curriculum appeared. The teacher's ability to see the learning situation through the student's eyes and understand how the student thinks when solving a learning problem is based on the teacher's general culture of thinking. Probably one does not exist without the other, and they should be trained together. Both study hypotheses were confirmed. Learner-centered teachers could deeply focus on a student who solves a problem to monitor his/her intellectual activity and present it in the form of a sequence of actions. The study task was completed. More than 1/3 of the study participants showed abilities for learner-centered pedagogy. Some results obtained seem to be alarming. Almost 1/3 of the surveyed population whose answers were egocentric was lacking empathic understanding of children. Perhaps this school teacher's choice of career in education was a mistake. About 2/3 of the study participants whose answers were non-specific had difficulties understanding how their students were thinking when solving problems. In addition to lack of empathy, they had a low culture of intellectual work. Other results obtained are encouraging. 1/5 of the study population showed preconditions for a possible development of the skills for learner-centered pedagogy. Results revealed in a perspective of training in the frame of the course curriculum. A training program will be organized that will help school teachers develop skill contributing to their cognitive culture and mastery of a learner-centered approach to education.